All right, we're ready to go. This is our first talk of the day, and we're running a little behind, so we're going to get going. So please wrap up your conversations and give it up for Patterson Cake, presenting 10 things I wish every CISO knew before a cyber incident.
Have you ever considered the peril of choosing a walkout song? If you choose a really kick-ass walkout song, by the time you get to the stage, the audience is thinking, I wish he would shut up and sit down so I can listen to the rest of the song. For those of you who are unfamiliar, that was Mick Gordon. Mick Gordon fans? Anybody? Okay, we got a couple. Rip and Tear, Doom. In any case, again, thanks for your patience this morning as we get started. Flexibility. One of the things I love about B-Sides is how casual it is, to be really honest. B-Sides is among my favorite security conferences to attend. Low-key, fun, low-cost, high-quality, all the really cool things about the cybersecurity community. You look around the room, and these are people who live in your neck of the woods. Very cool stuff. Touched on the sponsors at the outset. I would also encourage you, a ton of time, energy, and effort goes into making this happen. You see somebody with a purple badge, shake their hand and express your appreciation for all the time, energy, and effort that goes into making this happen. It's huge, huge, and I really personally appreciate it. You with me? Okay, sweet. Excuse me. So again, this was my concept slide once I chose my walkout music. This was not part of my CFP, so we'll go back into the more boring and actual presentation material. Today I want to talk to you about 10 things. See that? 10 things. Math wizards among us. The 10 things that I wish every CISO knew before a security incident occurred. You don't have to be a CISO. It just made for a catchy title, don't you think? I thought so too. I'm going to ask you to use your imagination just a little bit, a couple times throughout this conversation. I know it's early yet, but work with me. The first thing I would like you to do for me is imagine that you know that you have 2 weeks to 30 days and you're going to experience a major security incident. Your organization is going to have a breach sometime in the next 2 to 4 weeks. What are you going to do? What actions can you take? Are you going to rapidly roll out microsegmentation in 2 to 4 weeks? Implement zero trust actually it'll take me 2 to 4 weeks to figure out what that means. But anyway, what are you going to do? You might think, I'll go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT, put yourself in the role of a beleaguered security professional, understaffed and underpaid. I know I'm going to have an outbreak, major incident in 30 days. What do I do? Update your resume. What I want to talk to you about today is some practical things that I think you can legitimately do in the next days, weeks, most of which is free or almost free and fairly low effort. Tactical, practical things that you can accomplish in a short period of time that can help you to be prepared if and when that day comes and you have a significant security incident. Just a tiny bit about me. I've spent the last just about 2 years in active incident response, digital forensics and incident response for an MSSP called Avertium. I have spent most of my days, nights, weekends, responding to active security breaches. Very, very, very challenging. I often wonder why I do it. To be totally frank, I have 2 points on this slide. One of them is that I am by nature a tactician. When you call me or my team out to help you respond to an active breach, an active threat actor engagement, you do not want me to wax philosophical. Let's talk about your 5-year plan. That's not my bent. And so that's going to color the entire remainder of this conversation. I am absolutely intent on doing something right now to improve your security posture, especially in the face of an active threat. Number 2, IR is a weird thing. One of my favorite things about incident response is the clarity that comes from a breach. We talk regularly about risk. Risk is likelihood times impact as a general rule. How likely is something to occur? And if it does occur, how bad will it be? How do you calculate likelihood? A little bit of magic, a little bit of guessing, a little bit of imagination. When I come on scene, that question is answered. How likely is it that something really bad is going to happen? 100%. It just did. And with that comes this clarity, this intense clarity that I thrive on, and that is the leadership in the organization is like, what do we need to do to make sure this never happens again? How many of you in your job role would love to be asked that by senior management? That is one of my favorite things about the job, and my hope today in a brief period of time is to channel that and to help you see through that lens so that you can take action, a few things that you can do practically to be prepared. To set the stage, I want to talk just a little bit about the current threat landscape. Now, I have a narrow view of the current threat landscape. Vast majority of the cases that I have worked in the last couple of years have been fairly local. So this is the East Tennessee Threat Report, unofficially curated by me. Just a couple of quick tidbits, again, to set the stage for what we are up against, and again, some actions that we can take. Ransomware, who's heard of ransomware? Yeah, whatever. This is boring, right? Everybody talks about it all the time. There's really nothing new and exciting on this front, except for that it gets uglier and harder all the time. We do see kind of a dip in ransomware attacks in recent memory, but I think it's just a lull, starting to pick back up again. Significant decline in payments for lots of different reasons. I think we're getting a little better at backups. We're getting a little more skeptical of making payments. There are, of course, federal restrictions and regulations, which just means that the threat actors are playing dirtier. So double extortion, of course, is just the word of the day. I'm going to encrypt your stuff, and I'm also going to steal it, and I'm going to publish it, and I'm going to embarrass you in an effort to get some payments. Cloud. Cloud is a new thing in many ways, relatively speaking. Anybody ever used a floppy disk? 5 1/4? Glad there's some old people among us. In any case, cloud is new. Cloud is new, and there is, and we'll talk about this in just a minute, there is just zero margin for error. So cloud misconfiguration means really bad day for you. We see this a lot. We like to throw around the trite phraseology that identity is the new perimeter, and truthfully, I think that it is. So we'll talk a little bit about that moving forward. Last and certainly not least, business email compromise. This is huge, rampant, ongoing, growing, extremely frustrating for the businesses and the security people in the room. If you don't have MFA on all of your externally facing authenticated portals, shame on you. I'm sorry, it's your due diligence. It is not a silver bullet, I'm afraid, but this is just such a common and rampant inroad in today's wonderful modern world. And this is just a quick snippet of the current trend which we are seeing, and that is I pop a mailbox in a company, I hang out for a couple weeks, I see who that company does business with, then I take advantage of a trusted relationship with that external entity, I send them an email message, and because I'm extremely security conscious, I do it in an encrypted mail message. The user receives that from a trusted external entity, they click the link, it's a valid link to Microsoft, they authenticate to Microsoft, totally official, totally normal, and then there's an additional embedded link which escaped your email inbound filtering. Click the link, prompted to log in one more time, not legitimate. In this example, through Evil Jinx, capture MFA session cookie. I have a primary refresh token now, and I can stay logged into your mailbox for, ever. Bummer. The next step in that process, again, and I'm speaking mostly in our neck of the woods, just from my personal experience, actions on objective for that business email compromise are obviously often financial. So I always throw this slide in here just to say, multi-factor all the things, please. MFA as a tactical control is a must. It is not a silver bullet. Step 2, have multi-factor for other process in your organization, please. We worked with an entity recently who does significant transactions all over the world, financial services company, through one email thread, 3-4 messages from a popped external mailbox, transferred $1.6 million to the wrong person. There should be a process, right? I mean, we all go, that's crazy. It happens all the time. So again, multi-factor, all the things. If you're gonna do a transaction over X number of dollars based on your risk tolerance, involve 2 people, involve 3 people, $1.6 million, involve everybody. All right, that's what we're seeing. And that's what we're encountering and having to roll back from on a continuum. Before we jump into the top 10, I have a presupposition slide. We all come to this conversation with presuppositions, with preconceived notions based on our experience, right? And these are some of mine. One is that we, as an entity, as cybersecurity professionals, we often focus on the wrong things. I'm sorry, if that weren't the case, I would have far less work. Second, we have a tendency to overcomplicate everything. I won't ask you to raise your hands because I know you. I know me. It's part of why we're good at what we do. So we're going to work through the rest of this conversation to do a couple things. One, I'm going to use a little hyperbole. Everything I'm going to talk about today is firsthand relevant experience in the last 18 months. All absolutely true. I'm going to pull from extreme examples because I want to rattle your cage just a little bit and get you to think slightly differently. And if I can do that, even just a tiny, then it's a victory. Second, I'm going to work to oversimplify. Again, I'm a tactician. It needs to work. So I'm going to work again throughout this conversation to make things super stupid simple because that works for me. I think it works for you. Complexity is the enemy of security. Thank you. Last but not least, every business is a bit of a snowflake. It just is. You have unique requirements, unique priorities, unique resources. At the same time, I've noticed that snowflakes have a lot in common with one another. So I'm going to give you some generalities today, and I'm going to ask that you take those generalities and then apply them to your particular snowflake. You know you far better than I know you. The 10 things I'm going to walk through are not necessarily in prioritized list. And of course, I would love nothing more than at the end of this conversation for you to say, I've already done all of that. High five. Happy day, major victory. Imagination again, if you will. Imagine that you just started a new job in a large organization. And I don't know, do we have cube farms anymore? It doesn't seem that long ago that we waded through cube farms in major enterprises. I've been there, I've done that. So imagine, if you will, you're in a large, unfamiliar, new office environment. You're the new person, so you're working late. Naturally, everyone else has gone home. You're a little confused and disoriented about which way is up, left, right, down, but you're brand new, so no big deal. In the middle of that, the fire alarm starts to go off. And naturally, you begin to panic a little bit. I'm not exactly sure how I got into this building. How am I going to get out? I go to the nearest major door, and to my great joy and amazement, there's a little sign. There's an emergency evacuation sign. Sweet, I'm saved. And when you get there, this is what you find. Why we need a fire escape plan. Let's talk about actually the definition of a fire. Let's talk about some common ways that a fire started. Let's do some runbooks. Let's do a lot of runbooks, maybe 30, 40, or 50 of them. One of two things is going to happen at this point. You're going to die from smoke inhalation, or you're going to be a sane human being and just run for a door. This is what enterprises do for their CSIRP, and I find them to be largely useless. Out of all the incidents that I've worked in the last 2 years, I can count, nobody's ever leveraged their IR plan in the middle of active incident response. I'm sorry, it's just the reality of it. That frustrates me. It probably frustrates you. In many instances, the IRP is 70 pages long. 70 pages. It's an emergency guideline. Bad stuff just happened. Stand by. Stop it. There may be some value in that plan, but what I would like to suggest is that you have a useful, tactical, abbreviated plan to use actually in the event of an emergency. Keep it simple. Keep it 10 pages or less. If you ask me, 10 pages is still pretty long, frankly. If you need to have all these other additive components, make it modular, indexes. It's not that complicated. Just a handful of things that I think belong in that plan. things that you're actually going to want to know in the event of an emergency. If your IR plan literally contains a section on what ransomware is, you need to review that plan. I work for an MSSP. Part of the peril is you pay us good money to develop a plan, and it feels like if I give you a 6-page plan, you're going to be like, what? Find that right balance, find the right tension for your organization. You with me? You're awful quiet. No? Nobody's with me? Sweet. This slide hurts people's feelings sometimes. The next thing, when I roll into an engagement with a customer, bad things just happen, really bad things, possibly the worst day of their professional lives. One of the first questions I ask is, do you have cybersecurity insurance? And you want to know what the, by far and away, most common answer to that question is? Actually, it's, I think so. You think so. Might be a good thing to know in advance. And then the next question is, if you have it, do you think maybe we should call them? No. No. It's just a little dent. Plunger in some Vaseline, I can rub it out. Do not call the insurance company. You pay them $500 million a quarter. I would like to suggest that your cybersecurity insurance provider should be your business partner. And if you do not relate to them like that, you either need to enhance that relationship or find a new provider. Critical component of your IR plan. Critical, something you can do tomorrow. Okay, not tomorrow, Monday. Do you have cyber insurance? Nail that one right out of the gate. Who do you contact? When do you contact them? Develop a relationship with that person. Call them on Tuesday, just for the heck of it. Develop that rapport, develop that understanding, delineate these things. This is one component of your IRP, even if it's standalone, third-party resources. Have these numbers handy, have the names handy, know when to call them. This is not sexy, right? You're super excited about this one. I know you are. I'm sorry. Have these things lined out. How long does it take your organization to engage with a third-party contractor? If you need me tomorrow, how long is that going to take? I have literally seen it take 3-4 weeks for large enterprises. Incident response is not a game of seconds and minutes. I'm sorry, but it absolutely is a game of hours and days. Get this stuff lined out before an emergency. Super simple, not a big deal. There are lots of $0 IR retainers. Now, sometimes you get what you pay for, but that is better than nothing to have a prearranged engagement with somebody to help you if you need help. Make sure that they are approved by your cybersecurity insurance company in advance. Legal, again, large enterprises often have in-house legal and they are reticent to call on external resources. They're probably really, really good at their job. This is not that. I'm sorry. The legal requirements and involvement for a breach are very different. I would strongly consider having those folks arranged ahead of time. Right? All right, I'm not going to say anything else until somebody else responds to me. Logging and auditing. Again, not super exciting. Huge, huge issue for me as a digital forensics and incident response professional. So worked a case very recently. Again, a financial services company, got a mailbox popped. Threat actors hung out in that mailbox for a couple, 3 weeks. We get called in to ascertain how it happened and what went wrong. And of course, the business entity, their credit card information, there's vendor information, there's HR information in this mailbox. And what's the burning question on the enterprise's mind? Can you tell me exactly what the threat actor accessed? To which I respond, is your mail in M365? And everybody goes, yes. Almost everybody. Sorry, it's just a fact. The next question is, do you have E3 or E5 licensing? To which almost everybody responds, E3. E5 is expensive. It is indeed. It also lacks mail item access auditing. In that particular scenario, 125,000 mail messages in that mailbox, and we have to assume the threat actor accessed all of them because we don't have the audit data to prove otherwise. That's just one tiny example. Again, this is the snowflake conundrum. I need you to take this and I need you to think about your critical data infrastructure, things that are important to you, whether it's email, SaaS infrastructure, ERP, CRM, and make sure that the things that you need to be audited are audited. Please. Microsoft, really frustrating. If you're not familiar, if you're using M365, don't raise your hand, but you are, thank you. And you're not familiar with the differences between E3 and E5 licensing, you need to know, and you need to make sure your management knows and the business leadership knows the things that are unavailable to you based on auditing, and that applies to all of the above. Pay attention to that one. And maybe you can't afford E5 licensing. Most of us can't. It is legitimately significantly more expensive than E3, so buy a few licenses and assign them to your accounts payable, your accounts receivable, your HR people, your admin assistants, and then maybe your C-level execs. That's fairly manageable, usually. I see people buy them and then apply them only to C-level and or IT people for some odd reason, and that's usually not the attack vector, to be honest. Again, looking for the money. So one more time, make sure logging and auditing are adequate before you call me and I say, I can't help you. I literally have customers say, I'll buy E5 right now. Will it be retroactive? Don't think so. We touched on this at the very beginning. And I keep saying, zero margin for error. You mess up on a local server configuration internal to your enterprise, it's not good. Might even have a bad day or two. You mess up on cloud infrastructure and you expose S3 buckets or unauthenticated APIs or really, really bad deal. Working with a healthcare enterprise recently, just making a move into Azure. It's a brave new world for healthcare. Pushing on-prem infrastructure to Azure. They're smart enough to realize they don't have the internal expertise, so they engage with Microsoft directly. They send their engineers and their security engineers to do this training. Bravo. That's know thyself and know your resources. So they go to this training, and a very well-meaning security engineer is sitting in that training learning all about NSGs, network security groups, effectively your firewall for Azure infrastructure. Playing around, doing some testing, thinks he's in the test tenant for their environment, opens the firewall completely, leaves it open to the entire universe for, fortunately not an extended period of time, for all of their healthcare infrastructure. Zero margin for error. If you don't have internal expertise, get help. Please, on this one, this is a big deal, and most of these are pretty simple in a lot of ways. To not expose S3 buckets publicly, to not store your keys in GitHub, et cetera, et cetera. Finally, on this slide, do some active monitoring. Because of that zero margin for error, you need to be paying attention to this stuff on a continuum. You can't check it twice a year, right? It's a brave new world. The next topic of discussion is, of course, the oh-so exciting asset inventory. Say CIS top 18, right? Number 1 and number 2 are what? Asset inventory, hardware, software. Why do we hate that so much? And why do we stink at it? I don't know. It's not exciting. It's dynamic. I think it requires a dynamic solution. And it's just not our favorite thing to do, especially in a distributed enterprise. It becomes pretty hard. And I'm not asking you to do all of it right now today. Again, we're talking about the 2-week to 30-day interval. What I am asking you to do is define at least tier 0 and tier 1 immediately. You need to have 27 tiers in your environment? Fine. Tier 0, critical infrastructure. Let me tell you what it is. You ready? Active Directory and payroll. Maybe not for your environment, but for most, and you would be, maybe you wouldn't. You might be shocked to learn how long it takes an enterprise to make these decisions. We roll in, we do detection, analysis, containment, we stop the bleeding, we stop the threat actor, we then say to the enterprise, what do you want us to do now? Where should we prioritize our efforts? What do we do next? And they go, honestly, they never think of payroll until payday is looming. Basic tiers of criticality. the most important things to your environment. Don't go crazy, don't go hog wild. Again, in the interim, do something practical and tactical and help me to help you, at least by defining tier 0 and tier 1. And then maybe we can argue about tier 2, 3, 4 later. If you don't have an active inventorying solution, that should be a priority to you. I'm sorry, again, it's boring, it's lame, but if I don't know what you have, and you don't know what you have, how are you going to protect it? I know that's trite, you've heard it before, but it is important. You're doing awesome, by the way. You're staying mostly awake and alert, which I find to be encouraging. A few of you are actually laughing now and again. I think maybe at my jokes, but I'm not really sure. That's okay, I'll take it. Internal comms. How important are internal communications to your business on a regular basis, outside of crisis? Exactly. I would like to suggest that you identify and provision a role, a liaison role, in the midst of active incident response. What I see all the time is that bad things happen, boots on the ground, hands on keyboard, identify bad things. They get to work on rectifying, remediating bad things, and the CEO wants to jump in the middle of the war room. And then nobody gets anything done. And this happens on a continuum. So I would like to strongly suggest super silly, simple, but it helps me. I see this accelerate IR, maybe more than anything else in this conversation, from a business process perspective. Define a liaison role and at least 2 people who are capable of filling that role, who can communicate between the folks that are actually doing the work and then the executives, the business leaders, the decision makers. Go back and forth, a go-between. Hugely beneficial. And again, just super simple. And then I would also suggest that you get agreement beforehand at the nature of those calls and interactions, specifically between the technical, tactical team and the business decision makers. Additionally, I just mentioned business email compromise is really near the top of the list of my concerns from a security perspective. I think it should be near the top of the list for security concerns for you. So when you experience a business email compromise 30 days from now, how are you going to communicate in and around the enterprise when email has been compromised? Why does nobody think of that? Email's down. How are we going to let everybody know? I know. We'll send them an email. I mean, seriously, you've seen that, right? I mean, I've literally seen that happen. You got to go, I need to question your logic. Have you heard of Gmail? It's this cool free email service. Before bad things happen, define out-of-band comms. It could be free. Obviously, you may have compliance concerns, you may have business requirements, so you may have to spend a little money. You could spin up an alternate M365 tenant, lots of email solutions. Do it in advance. Have an out-of-band email solution, an out-of-band chat solution, and last and definitely not least, once you implement it, tell everyone. Seriously, we do tabletops all the time, and we'll get to this question, do you have out-of-band? They'll be like, yeah. The IT person or the security person will say, yeah, and all of the executives go, we do? Every time. So step them through it, test it in advance, simple, cheap, extremely meaningful. Communications will help dramatically to improve our effectiveness in response. A couple more and we're almost done. I'm trying to go fast to catch up just a little bit of time, incidentally. And if we have time for Q&A at the end, awesome. If we don't, I would love to chat with you sidebar as you are willing and able. Do we even need to talk about this one? You have backups, right? Of course you do. Do you test your backups? Some of us do. Are you confident that they are offline and resilient to the latest ransomware attacks? Again, I'm sorry to say the gloves, of course, are coming off more and more with these threat actor groups, and the first thing that they're going to target once they achieve initial actions on objective are to nuke your backups. And if they're all online, direct attached, in your NAS, AD authenticated, don't call me. We worked with a large publishing company recently that had a tremendous backup solution. Lengthy retention, ridiculous storage, frequent cycles, all on network attached storage, all AD authenticated. They've been in business for 20, 25 years. Threat actors came in, nuked it all. They had nothing. Had to rebuild. This a publishing company. Think they had some assets? Nothing. It's horrifying. And I have nothing to offer them. You want to pay the ransom? No, no, we don't. Rebuilt from scratch. Don't do that. Again, this is just your due diligence. You have to have backups. You have to work towards immutable backups. That's a fun word. That's right up there with zero trust. Just means backups that can't otherwise be altered. And if that means old school, do it on a USB drive, unplug USB drive, put it in safe, not ideal, but a heck of a lot better than using 25 years of corporate data. Have your backups. This, oh, heresy almost came out of my mouth. This is more important than cybersecurity insurance, right? I mean, this is your ultimate insurance policy. Insurance will just pay for me to help you, maybe. They're not going to pay for you to rebuild your business. I'm going to talk about priority 1 and priority 2 in just a second when in terms of active incident response, but this is, I think, honestly, priority 1 in terms of your IT infrastructure. You know it. Make it a priority. And then, of course, this is also, I don't understand this, but the mean time to recovery and the retention periods are things like that people often don't think about. We do backups every night. How long do you keep them? 3 days. What? 7 days. That's not enough. That's not enough. I rarely engage in a situation where there's an active incident that the threat actor hasn't been there for at least 3 weeks. That's pretty normal. Sometimes faster than that, but almost always 2 to 3 weeks. That's a minimum. Again, talk about a hard conversation. Well-meaning IT folks that have implemented this robust solution of immutable backups that only extends for 7 days. Don't do that. And then, last but not least, how long does it take you to recover? We stored them all in super cheap Glacier Deep Archive. We can restore each of those servers in approximately 4 days. How many servers do you have? Do the math. Not good. Think this stuff through. This is not difficult to calculate in advance. Make it a priority. I know you, again, I know me. We roll out day 0, day 1 on active incident response, usually is an 18, 20, 22-hour day. Especially if you have a small IT team, a small security team, that is brutal and it is not sustainable and it is not good for you, your business or your employees. So one more time, in advance of an active incident, be aware of health and safety, the health and safety of your staff, not to mention the productivity. I'm a little older than some of you. When I hit about 22 hours, my work product, not so great, not so great. I was working an incident recently, small dedicated IT team, and they were just not going to go home until things were rectified. And priority 1 was restoration of Active Directory, and late in the night, 22, 23 hours into day 1, and we accidentally restored all of the wrong AD snapshots. Guess what? We didn't get to go home or rotate staff at that point. Think this through. In that particular instance, we learned immediately, and we appointed someone as a health and safety monitor who would walk around and go, do you need something to eat? Have you been drinking water? Let me get you a hamburger. And I kid you not, that transformed that department in our response. We're like, yeah, I do need something to eat. I haven't eaten in, can't remember when. Simple, cheap, extremely meaningful. If you have a small staff, again, you need to come up with a staff rotation process. You can't have them work 3 days straight. You just can't. So keep that in mind and pay attention. Some people have a tolerance. Some people can work 24 hours straight and still be productive. Red Bull to the rescue. I can't do that. I just explode. So know your staff, know their capabilities, keep an eye on it, make it an active part of your incident response. Again, almost done. Incident response team. I love this quote. No man fears to do that which he knows he does well. I would strongly encourage you to empower and define your internal response team. Get them some training. Do not expect them to be incident responders on a whim. They're system engineers, they're network engineers, they may even be security analysts. This is not that. It's just not. And I walk in and they're petrified in many instances. They're petrified of two things. They don't know what they're doing, and they're afraid that someone's going to make them look bad because they screwed up. So cultivate a culture where you get some training for these folk, that you set them up for success. They don't have to know how to do everything, but they do need to know how to do a few things. And I'm going to talk about priority 1 and priority 2 on the next slide, but give them some preparation. Set them up for success. Not again, huge deal. Have a tactical plan. Last but not least, at least consider evidence preservation for me, will you please? And that just means you want me to help you to tell the story of how this happened and why it happened, mostly because you don't want it to happen again, right? If you've shut down, nuked, removed, deleted, don't have the logs in the first place, makes my life really hard, sometimes impossible, and I have to say, I don't know, can't tell you. So give some thought. It's not that complicated to think about. Do you retain firewall logs? Who retains firewall logs for 6 months? Not good man. Not that many people. Firewall logs they're noisy, right? Who wants to retain a list of 352,000 denies for every 2 weeks? I mean, nobody, right? That's okay, truthfully. If you keep 7 days, then when bad stuff happens, have it part of your plan to archive that 7 days for me. You don't have to keep a year forever. Just think about it. Think about it when something like that occurs. You've already talked about audit logs and retention. Save them. Save them for me. All right. Last and definitely not least, when I roll in again, question number 2 or 3 often is, have you unplugged the internet? My greatest weapons for containment against an active threat actor are egress and authentication. If I can stop communications, egress meaning outbound internet, we can breathe. The second thing, what can I do in your environment without authentication? Hopefully not much. I need a credential to access sensitive, critical things. Make these priority 1 and priority 2 of your incident response tactical program. Have a granular plan for disconnecting the internet, and if it means unplugging the internet for the entire enterprise, do it. Sorry, do it anyway. If you can manage granular, site-based, or functional, or whatever, more power to you, but have a plan in advance. And authentication. Be prepared to rotate all AD creds on a whim. And then, secondarily, recognize there's a whole lot of stuff that's probably important in your environment that's not AD integrated. Right. Priority 1 and 2. And I'm done. You're going to make a practical, tactical IR plan. It's going to be short and sweet, less than 10 pages if you can swing it. You're going to pre-negotiate and arrange third-party access to legal, cybersecurity, incident response help. You're going to review your logging and auditing and make sure you have the data that you need, the auditable fields that you need, the retention that you need to meet your compliance requirements. You're going to pay close attention to your cloud resources, get a little external help, at least a little external training, along with active monitoring. You're going to do asset inventory. You're going to inventory all the things so that you know what you need to protect. You're going to talk about internal communications, a liaison relationship between the technical management leadership teams. You're going to develop out-of-band comms for little to no money, and then socialize that those exist. You're going to have backups. You're going to test your backups. You're going to work towards offline and or immutable backups. You're going to pay attention to your incident response team because you care about them and their physical, mental, emotional health and well-being. You're going to get them just a little bit of training to set them up for success. And then you're going to have a tactical plan for disconnecting or disrupting threat actor communications via egress management and a plan for rotating creds.